It's Tuesday, the 19th of August. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. And yes, it's true, I'm still on the road. All right, let's get briefed. First up, we'll break down the results of President Trump's Oval Office meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky and his broader discussion with a large gathering, it was almost a gaggle, of European leaders who flanked the Ukrainian president for his visit to the White House. Later in the show, Hungary lashes out at Kyiv, accusing Ukraine of mounting what they called an outrageous and unacceptable attack that disabled a Russian oil pipeline supplying the NATO ally. Sounds like Putin's buddy, Hungarian leader Viktor Orban, is getting a little testy. Plus, a growing number of Palestinians are reportedly turning on Hamas and preparing for a future without the militant group in power. But as the discontent spreads, Hamas is striking back with brutal violence against their own civilians, executing critics wherever they can find them. And in today's back of the brief, the bromance between Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong deepens. You didn't think it could get any deeper, did you? But it does, as the Russian strongman sends a personal letter to Kim, heaping praise on North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine. Oh, that's sweet. The two belligerent powers have vowed to expand their military ties to forge a, quote, just and multipolar world order. And then they both had a good laugh. But first, in today's PDB Spotlight, President Trump, Ukrainian President Zelensky, and a coalition of European leaders struck an optimistic note about the prospects of ending Russia's war in Ukraine during an unprecedented gathering at the White House on Monday. The meeting was hastily arranged following Trump's summit on Friday with Russian President Putin, after which the president appeared to break with Ukraine and European allies, advocating a sweeping peace plan involving territorial swaps over an immediate ceasefire. As we discussed on yesterday's PDB, Putin advocated a plan that calls for Ukraine's withdrawal from Donetsk and Luhansk in exchange for a freeze along the current front lines. Putin's immodest proposal, basically it's a wish list of his past demands, would see Russia return very small slices of territory in Sumy and Kharkiv, totaling about 170 square miles, while Kyiv would give up the entire eastern Donbass region, covering some 2,550 square miles of territory. Ukraine would also be barred from joining NATO and have to recognize Russian control over Crimea, which was illegally annexed back in 2014. The pressure was on for Zelensky, particularly after Trump said Sunday evening that Zelensky had the power to end the war with Russia almost immediately, as long as he was willing to officially cede Crimea and give up on Ukraine's NATO aspirations and bow to whatever other demands Putin has. No, he didn't say that part, but you get my point. But on Sunday, Zelensky all but rejected Putin's proposal, saying he won't cede any territory to Moscow and that it was up to Russia to, quote, end this war, which it by itself started. Now, it's hard to spot the lie there. But despite the differing visions of peace between Trump and Zelensky, Monday's meeting was largely a convivial affair, with Zelensky calling it the best conversation he's had with the president so far this year, and that's good news. That's according to a report from Reuters. The gathering was certainly a far cry from Zelensky's last trip to the White House in February, perhaps you remember that, which ended with a televised shouting match in the Oval Office. On Monday, Trump greeted Zelensky warmly outside the White House, shaking his hand and expressing delight at the Ukrainian president's black suit. Now, as you may recall, Zelensky was criticized by a reporter, or somebody who self-identified as a reporter, at the disastrous February encounter for Zelensky showing up in his typical military outfit. As I mentioned, unlike his February trip, this time Zelensky was joined by the leaders of Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Finland, the European Union, and NATO, in a significant show of solidarity. Prior to the meeting, Trump said it was a great honor to host the high-profile delegation, noting how rare that it was to have so many European leaders at the White House at one time. So, with all that in mind, did the meeting move the needle on Trump's peace efforts? Well, it's a bit early to say, but clearly there's still a lot up in the air. Trump advocated for his proposed trilateral summit between Putin, Zelensky, and himself, and that's an idea that Zelensky said he supported. Trump also offered strong post-settlement security guarantees for Ukraine. Now, while details of what these guarantees may look like remain murky, and frankly, the importance here will be in the details, Trump has suggested they would be similar to those provided in NATO's Article 5, which obligates all members to treat an attack on one as an attack on all. Trump said Europe would need to take the lead on security guarantees, but that the U.S. would, quote, help out with substantial support. Now, Zelensky thanked Trump for his commitment, calling it very important and a, quote, strong signal of U.S. support for Kyiv. Zelensky struck a deferential tone throughout the encounter, repeatedly expressing gratitude to Trump, though he largely stuck to his position. He noted that even if Ukraine were to consider territorial concessions, they would have to be approved by a parliamentary referendum. During the broader conversation with European leaders, many also praised Trump's efforts with Putin, saying that he'd opened a potential pathway to peace. They stressed, however, that the path forward remains complicated. Well, there's a statement of the obvious, to say the least. Trump reiterated his stance that direct peace negotiations with Russia could get underway without a ceasefire. But German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron pushed back. Merz said Kyiv and the EU were united in their support of a ceasefire and called on Trump to join them in upping the financial pressure on Russia ahead of any substantive negotiations with Putin. And perhaps the biggest development of the day, Trump took a break from the meetings to call Putin. Trump later posted to Truth Social that arrangements were underway for a meeting between Putin and Zelensky to be followed by a trilateral summit. As of Monday evening, the Kremlin had not confirmed a meeting with Zelensky, but did cryptically say that Trump and Putin had discussed, quote, the idea of raising the level of Russian and Ukrainian representation in the negotiations. That's according to Axios. But despite the largely well-mannered day of meetings at the White House, there are still more questions than answers. And on the battlefields of Ukraine, meanwhile, Putin's attacks remain unrelenting. Early Monday morning, Russian forces launched drone attacks on Ukrainian cities that killed at least 10 people, including 2 children, and wounded dozens. Zelensky slammed Moscow, calling it a, quote, cynical attempt to undermine Monday's hastily arranged talks. All right, coming up after the break. Hungary, led by a supporter and occasional toady of Vladimir Putin's, lashes out at Kyiv over an alleged attack that crippled a Russian oil pipeline supplying their country. Plus, a growing number of Palestinians are reportedly turning on Hamas, but the terror group is responding with violent crackdowns on critics. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Well, Labor Day, which is coming up, is that one American holiday where, well, we celebrate hard work by not working. And while no one's really quite sure what we're supposed to be doing on Labor Day, grilling, resting, shopping for mattresses, we do know this. Tri-Tails Beef is giving away a free prime ribeye when you order either the Freedom Box or the Pitmaster Grill Out Pro now through September 1st. Let me tell you about this great company. Tri-Tails is a 5th-generation family-run Texas ranch. Real people, no corporations, no middlemen, no fluff, just pasture-raised, grain-finished, dry-aged beef delivered straight from their ranch to your home. It couldn't be simpler. Their amazing steaks will make your Labor Day grill the most American thing since pickup trucks and porch flags. One heads up, there will be no shipping on the 1st or 2nd of September. I mean, after all, even ranchers get a break occasionally. So head to trybeef.com. That's trybeef.com and grab your box. And you know what? You can even order the PDB box. That's right. It's chock full of my favorite steaks. This Labor Day, don't settle for shrink-wrapped steak from the mega store, right? Get the real stuff, straight from the Tri-Tails Ranch to your home. Welcome back to the PDB. Well, most of Europe has broken with Moscow. Hungary's decision to cling to Russian oil backfired Monday when Ukraine struck the Druzhba pipeline, cutting off supplies and ratcheting up tensions with Kyiv. Hungary's foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, calling the strike on a NATO ally's supply line, get this, a, quote, outrageous and unacceptable act, and warned Ukraine not to forget how much of its electricity flows from the Hungarian grids. Perhaps Ukraine could remind the Hungarian leadership that their purchases of Russian oil and gas fuel Putin's war machine against a NATO ally. That's a bit of tit for tat. According to Reuters, a transformer station was hit via a Ukrainian drone, suspending the 95,000 barrels a day that Russia pumps into Hungary. The armed forces of Ukraine confirmed responsibility for the strike overnight. Now, the Soviet-era Druzhba system is a relic of the Cold War, stretching from Russia through Belarus and Ukraine before splitting west toward Hungary and Slovakia. Kyiv has increasingly made it a target. As we previously discussed here on the PDB, for Ukraine, the strike is part of a broader campaign against Russia's energy infrastructure, which provides roughly a quarter of the Kremlin's annual revenues. Now, since the beginning of August, Kyiv has disrupted an estimated 22% of the Kremlin's total refining capacity. That is a significant development. And just days before Monday's strike, Ukraine claimed responsibility for targeting a pumping station in Russia at the very junction where the pipeline splits to serve Central Europe. Moscow attempted to reassure Hungary that oil would start flowing again soon. Siarto said he spoke with Russia's deputy energy minister, who insisted repairs were underway, though no timeline was offered. Hungary's oil giant, MOL, tried to calm markets, saying regional supplies remain guaranteed and restoration work is already in motion. Yet Siarto himself conceded last year that the Druzhba would remain Hungary's primary crude oil route, making Budapest uniquely exposed to any disruption. Meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister dismissed Budapest's complaints outright, posting on X that Hungary should, quote, send complaints to Moscow, not Kyiv, while reminding Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government that it had ignored repeated warnings about Russia's unreliability. Orban has carved out an anomalous position inside NATO and the EU since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He's resisted aid packages for Kyiv, kept open channels with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and vowed to block Ukraine's EU accession bid, even as Brussels formally launched talks last year, setting 2030 as a tentative target date. Now, that isolation has left Hungary exposed. Siarto doubled down Monday, however, declaring, quote, this is not our war. Hungary will stay out of it, before accusing both Brussels and Kyiv of trying to drag Budapest into the conflict. At home, the pipeline shutdown is colliding with simmering political unrest. Opposition leader Peter Magyar demanded Moscow stay out of Hungary's internal affairs, blasting Kremlin-backed disinformation and intimidation efforts. His warning followed fresh claims from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, known as the SVR, that Brussels and Kyiv are secretly bankrolling him to unseat Orban, offering, quote, significant material, administrative, media, and lobbying resources. Magyar, who last year traveled to Ukraine with humanitarian aid, has pitched himself as the pro-Western alternative to Orban, promising to reset alliances and end Budapest's slide toward Moscow. With elections looming in 2026 and Ukraine's intensifying campaign against Russian oil, Hungary's energy ties are becoming a flashpoint in the battle for its political future. Okay, turning now to Gaza, where the tide of public opinion continues to shift against Hamas. Nearly 2 years into the war, a growing number of Palestinians are calling for an end to Hamas's rule, but the Iran-backed terror group has not answered with concessions, but with kidnappings and executions meant to crush dissent. Well, there's a shocking surprise. Nearly all of Gaza's 2 million residents have been uprooted in the 21 months of fighting, and many now openly blame Hamas for their misery. Mumin al-Natur, co-founder of the We Want to Live movement and president of Palestinian Youth for Development, told Fox News that the 7 October 2023 terror attacks marked a turning point, souring public opinion on the terrorists inside the enclave. He said, quote, after the attack and the consequences that followed, more and more people in Gaza despise them. Al-Natur himself is now in hiding, shifting from house to house to avoid arrest or worse, after publicly voicing his opinion against Hamas. The Iran-backed terror group's propaganda machine has only deepened resentment. In recent weeks, its armed wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, has released videos flaunting executions of Gazans, paired with warnings that any dissent will be met with violence. That message is aimed solely at Palestinians, reinforcing Hamas's grip through fear. Longtime PDB listeners will remember our coverage of the first major crack in Hamas's control. That was back in March of this year, when thousands of residents flooded the streets of the enclave to stage the largest anti-Hamas demonstration since the terror group seized power back in 2007. Those protests, demanding a ceasefire and an end to the war, were swiftly crushed by Hamas through public executions of its own people. The rallies collapsed just as ceasefire talks with Israel broke down, talks that Hamas rejected outright unless they included permanent recognition of Palestinian statehood, and that's something Israel has never accepted. A Gaza-based political analyst told Fox News that many citizens now want Hamas sidelined in negotiations, pressing for talks led by the Palestinian Authority or even Egypt. He said, quote, "Negotiating solely with Hamas doesn't help. The fighters don't surrender. Most of them fight until the end, wanting to become martyrs," end quote. And even as Hamas has signaled this week that it might cede control of Gaza under certain conditions, it has refused to disarm or accept demilitarization. That's an immovable sticking point for Israel. Jerusalem, meanwhile, is preparing for an expanded offensive with Gaza City as its next target. As we've previously discussed, Israeli leaders have made clear their objectives: uproot Hamas, dismantle its military infrastructure, and install a new layer of local leadership under military oversight. Amid the looming Israeli offensive, signs of quiet rebellion are already emerging. In eastern Rafah, teachers are organizing classrooms that reject Hamas ideology. One educator described her lessons as a sanctuary of tolerance, stating, quote, "People like me and the students yearn for peace, comfort, hope, and safety. We want to live in an environment free of war, shelling, and destruction," end quote. Her efforts mirror a broader undercurrent across Gaza. Citizens, activists, and educators are increasingly rejecting Hamas, demanding leadership that serves the people rather than a militant agenda. One resident who requested to remain anonymous put it bluntly, stating, quote, "It's true, a lot of people are against Hamas now. They don't fear Hamas anymore. They're just killers, stupid people," end quote. So for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Palestinians are breaking their silence, obviously willing to risk everything to voice dissent. But an obvious question is whether that defiance can outlast Hamas's violent reprisals. Coming up next in the back of the brief, Vladimir Putin sends a gushing letter to his pen pal Kim Jong-un, praising what he called the, quote, "heroic efforts of North Korean troops fighting in Ukraine." Stay with us. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a moment of your time to talk about protecting your hard-earned assets. Now, you've probably noticed there's a little bit of turmoil out there in the economy, right? You got trade wars, you got tariffs back and forth, you got a U.S. Federal Reserve that seems a bit at odds with the White House, you've got uncertainty over employment numbers, you've got a volatile stock market, and you get the picture. And it's at times like these when you need to think about your assets and how to protect them. And one way to do that is through diversification. So I'm here to suggest that you consider diversifying with gold from the Birch Gold Group. They're the precious metals specialists. Look, for decades, gold has been considered a safe haven during times of economic stagnation or global uncertainty. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or maybe an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Or, like a lot of folks, you can just buy gold and store it safely at home. First, you want to get yourself educated. So Birch Gold can send you a free information kit on gold. Just text PDB to the number 989-898. Again, text PDB to 989-898. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. Text PDB to 989-898. In today's back of the brief, it looks like the bond between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is strengthening, with Putin recently penning a gushing letter to the fellow dictator that hailed Pyongyang's troops fighting in Ukraine as nothing less than, quote, heroic. The letter, plastered across North Korean state media on Friday, marked the August 15th anniversary of Korea's liberation from the Japanese rule in 1945. That's a date that Putin leaned on to frame a narrative of shared wartime camaraderie. He declared that, quote, "the bonds of military friendship, goodwill, and mutual aid remain solid and reliable even today," end quote. Just get a room. Putin then credited North Korean forces with helping Russia claw back the Kursk region after Kyiv's counter-invasion last summer that left the Kremlin humiliated. He wrote, quote, "the Russian people will keep forever the memories of their bravery and self-sacrifice," end quote. Putin added that the two belligerent powers would continue to act jointly in, quote, "establishing a just and multipolar world order," end quote. And then he finished off the note with several X's and O's and a big red lipstick kiss. Now, as we've tracked, South Korean intelligence estimates Kim has deployed between 11,000 and 12,000 troops to Ukraine, with as many as 30,000 more expected. Many of those men, inexperienced in modern warfare, were thrown onto Russia's front lines as mere cannon fodder during the push to reclaim Kursk, shoring up Moscow at a critical juncture. In addition to troops, officials in Seoul estimate that nearly half of Russia's ammunition is now sourced from North Korea. But the troop deployments, along with those munition transfers, haven't been pro bono. The battlefield pipeline now runs both ways, with Pyongyang receiving large shipments of advanced military equipment, oil, and cutting-edge missile technology from Moscow. Beyond the front, North Korean laborers sent to Russia to patch wartime shortages have been trapped in what Seoul calls, quote, slave-like conditions. According to a recent report from the BBC, the laborers are living and sleeping in bug-infested shipping containers or on the bare concrete floors of unfinished apartments. While the conditions may be squalid for the laborers, their presence is just another example of the deepening cooperation between the two repressive regimes. Diplomatically, the choreography is, well, no less intimate. A Russian delegation trekked to Pyongyang last week to thank Kim personally for sending what they praised as, quote, excellent soldiers. Days before, Kim announced he and Putin had agreed by phone to keep up, quote, closer communication and tighten cooperation. And, of course, all of this comes atop last year's Mutual Defense Pact, inked during Putin's rare trip to Pyongyang in what was hailed by both regimes as their strongest alignment since the Cold War. The developments all underscore how Russia's war in Ukraine has pushed Moscow into the arms of one of the world's most isolated dictatorships. Given his isolation on the global stage, though, it's not like Putin can be picky about his small circle of friends. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Tuesday, the 19th of August. Now, if you have any questions or comments, and I hope you do, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And as you've no doubt seen on billboards all around town, to listen to the show ad-free, just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, if there's something that all of us can believe in, it's hard work, self-reliance, and showing up for the people who count on us, right? And a key factor in doing all of that, frankly, is getting enough rest. You know what I'm talking about. Getting a good night's sleep is critically important. So introducing Beam's Dream Powder. Beam, that's B-E-A-M, is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values, hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It's a nighttime blend packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep, so you can wake up refreshed. How good does that sound? Dream is made with a powerful blend of ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. And here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off. Yes, I said 40. That's 40. Try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Just go to shopbeam.com/Mike, that's M-I-K-E, and use code Mike at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Mike and use code Mike for up to 40% off. Sleep better, wake up stronger, and show up ready for your family, your work, and your country. Because when you're well-rested, well, you're unstoppable.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.